Hi, good people. First, I want to thank all my subscribers and those taking time to like my videos. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for taking time to support me. Whoa, the gift that keeps giving. Watch one among so many trading videos about P. Diddy. Watch this video.
I wish I never met Diddy that day. It was early 2018, and I woke up expecting nothing more than a regular day at my job. My routine was always the same: a cup of coffee, a quick breakfast, and a quiet drive through the empty morning streets. The office was just another stop in the predictable rhythm of my life, a place of bright lights, clean hallways, and the illusion of safety. I never suspected that beneath its polished surface something dark was lurking. Something that had been there all along, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. When I arrived at the office that morning, everything seemed normal at first. I nodded to the security guard, exchanged polite smiles with the receptionist, and settled into my desk, flipping on my computer as I did every day. The air smelled of stale coffee and ink from the printers. Phones rang softly. Keyboards clacked, a hum of quiet productivity. But there was something else that day, something off. At first I chalked it up to paranoia, a whisper here, a glance there, small things I would have usually ignored. But this time, the looks people exchanged weren't just casual. They were meaningful, almost secretive. I started noticing patterns. Certain words, when spoken aloud, would cause people to stiffen. There was a tension hanging in the air, thick like a storm cloud waiting to break. At one point, I overheard a conversation near the water cooler. Two colleagues were speaking in hushed tones about something they called the special load. One of them, a nervous-looking man with darting eyes, muttered, "We have to follow the old rules, even if no one asks." I don't know why, but his words stuck with me. I tried to shake off the unease, telling myself I was overthinking things. But as the day continued, the signs only grew stranger. A misplaced file, a door left slightly ajar that was usually locked, the faintest scent of something metallic in the air, like rust, or perhaps something worse. I told myself it was just an old building, quirks in the system, a long week making me jumpy. But then I saw it, a memo buried under a stack of documents, marked with an unfamiliar seal. The design was odd, intricate, almost ancient in appearance. It took me a moment, but then I recognized it. I had seen that symbol before. It was etched into a necklace. Diddy's necklace. Diddy wasn't an employee. He wasn't even a regular visitor. He would appear from time to time, always walking through the building like he belonged there, though no one could ever explain why. There was an air about him, something intangible, yet commanding. His necklace, which I had dismissed as a strange fashion choice, now took on a more sinister meaning in my mind. That evening, as the office emptied out, I found myself unable to shake my curiosity. I needed to understand what was happening. The tension had built all day, and I could feel it pressing in on me, demanding I look deeper. I stayed behind. The silence of the office at night was unsettling. The absence of the usual office chatter made every sound, every creak of the floor, every flicker of the lights feel magnified. That's when I noticed a door. I had worked in this building for years, but I had never seen this door before. It was tucked away at the end of the hall, partially hidden behind an old cabinet. The handle was ornate. Unlike any other in the building, it looked ancient. A sense of dread crawled up my spine. I shouldn't open it, but I did. Behind it, a narrow staircase led downward. The steps groaned beneath my weight as I descended, the darkness swallowing me whole. The air grew colder, heavier. My breath sounded too loud in the confined space. At the bottom, I found a room that should not have existed. It was vast, lined with towering bookshelves filled with aged tomes. Dust clung to the air, swirling in the dim candlelight. Artifacts, strange and unfamiliar, were scattered across wooden tables. But my eyes were drawn to one thing above all else: a collection of jars. At first, I thought they contained preserved specimens, some kind of biological study. But as I stepped closer, my stomach turned. Bones, flesh, things I could not begin to understand, submerged in dark liquid. I backed away, my pulse hammering. Then I heard voices, a low murmur, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. I followed the sound to a heavy curtain at the far end of the chamber. My hands trembled as I reached for it, my instincts screaming at me to stop. But I had already come too far. I pulled the curtain aside, and what I saw will haunt me forever. A group of people stood around a stone altar, their faces eerily blank, their bodies draped in dark robes. Some of them were my co-workers. They chanted in unison, their voices carrying an ancient weight. On the altar lay a figure, bound, struggling. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Then I saw him. Diddy? He stood at the head of the altar, his hands clasped, his necklace gleaming in the dim light. His expression was unreadable, calm, detached. A figure stepped forward, a ceremonial dagger glinting in their hand. The chanting grew louder. The blade came down, a muffled scream, and then silence. I don't remember how long I stood there, paralyzed by horror. Every detail burned itself into my memory, the cold air, the coppery scent, the lifeless eyes of the robed figures. The realization that I had walked into something far beyond my understanding. Then a sound behind me, a slow, deliberate creak. I turned. Diddy stood in the doorway. His eyes met mine, and in that moment I knew I had seen too much. "You should not have seen this," he said, his voice as calm as ever. "Now you are a part of it." I wanted to run, to scream, to do anything but stand there, frozen under his gaze. But I couldn't move. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. It was as if the very walls were closing in. And then he smiled, a slow, knowing smile. I don't remember how I left. I only remember running, up the stairs, through the office, out into the night air, gasping, heart pounding. I didn't go home. I couldn't. I drove without direction, my mind racing with questions I would never be able to answer. Who were they? How long had this been happening? How many people had disappeared into that chamber? And worst of all, was I next? I spent weeks in a state of paranoia. I could feel eyes on me everywhere I went. Strange messages appeared in my inbox, cryptic and threatening. My apartment felt unsafe. I changed my routine, avoided dark places, but deep down, I knew I had already crossed the line. One night, I packed a small bag, took everything I had collected, the photos, the recordings, and disappeared. I changed my name, moved to a town where no one knew me. But no matter how far I run, I still feel it. A presence. A shadow in the corner of my eye. A whisper in an empty room. I know they haven't forgotten me. And I know one day they'll come back. For weeks after I fled, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flickering candlelight, the cold gleam of the dagger, the way the shadows danced against the walls of that hidden chamber. I kept replaying the moment Diddy looked at me, his eyes void of fear, his words lingering in my mind like a curse. "You should not have seen this. Now you are part of it." I tried to convince myself that if I stayed quiet, if I buried what I had seen deep enough, maybe they would forget about me. Maybe they would let me go. But the fear never faded. At first, it was little things. A car that seemed to always be parked near my new apartment. A man at the grocery store who lingered just a little too long at the end of the aisle, watching me. My mail arriving already open, the envelopes neatly slit, as if someone had checked inside before handing it over. I tried to brush it off as paranoia. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was just stress. But then the phone call started. At first it was silence. I would answer, expecting some scam call or a wrong number, only to be met with heavy breathing on the other end. Then the whispering began. Soft at first, barely audible, but growing louder with each call. The words were always the same. You should not have seen. I changed my number. It didn't matter. The calls continued. I moved again. And still they found me. I became a ghost of my former self, always looking over my shoulder, never staying in one place for too long. I stopped using my real name, paid for everything in cash, avoided cameras whenever I could. But no matter what I did, they were always just a step behind. One night, as I was locking the door to my motel room, I saw something that confirmed my worst fears. Across the parking lot, under the dull glow of a streetlight, stood Diddy. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't lurking in the shadows. He stood there in plain sight, his hands in his pockets, his necklace glinting under the light. Watching me. I froze. My hands clenched around the key so tightly I thought it might snap. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. He didn't move. He didn't speak. And then he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not even a mocking one. It was the kind of smile a predator gives its prey when it knows there's nowhere left to run. I backed into my room and slammed the door shut. My hands were shaking so badly, I struggled to lock the deadbolt. I stumbled back, staring at the door, half expecting him to break it down. But he didn't. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. When I finally dared to look through the peephole, he was gone. But on the ground, just outside my door, was a single object. His necklace. I didn't sleep that night. By morning, I was gone. I drove for hours without stopping, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. The highway stretched endlessly ahead of me. But no matter how far I went, I couldn't escape the feeling that I was being followed. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was certainty. I was being hunted. Weeks passed. I settled into a new routine in a small, nowhere town. I got a cheap apartment under a fake name, took a job that paid in cash. I kept my head down. And for a while, it seemed to work. No phone calls, no strange men watching me, no Diddy. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had escaped. Then one night, I received a letter. There was no return address, no stamp, just a plain white envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper. 5 words, written in neat, careful handwriting. You are part of it. I felt my stomach drop. I checked every lock, every window. I barely slept that night, listening for any sound, any sign that someone was there. But the apartment was silent. Until 3:12 a.m. A knock. Soft. Deliberate. I didn't move. Another knock. I held my breath. Then, the sound of paper sliding under the door. I stared at it, afraid to move, afraid to even breathe. Minutes passed before I finally gathered the courage to pick it up. It was another note. It's time to come home. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my bag, my car keys, everything I could carry, and ran. I didn't know where I was going, I just knew I had to get away. But as I stepped outside, I saw them. 3 men, standing by my car, waiting. Diddy was one of them. I turned to run, but before I could take a single step, a hand clamped over my mouth. Darkness swallowed me whole. The return. I woke up in a place that felt wrong. The air was thick and damp, the scent of burning wax filling my nose. I was lying on cold stone, my wrists bound with rope, my head pounded. Slowly I forced my eyes open. I was back. Back in the hidden chamber beneath the office building. Candles flickered, casting eerie shadows against the walls. Figures in dark robes stood in a circle around me, their faces hidden. And at the center of it all, Diddy. He wasn't smiling now. You ran, he said, almost disappointed. You shouldn't have. I struggled against the bindings, my breath coming in quick, panicked bursts. You don't understand, he continued, stepping closer. This isn't something you escape from. This is something you become. He crouched beside me, tilting his head slightly as he studied my face. You are chosen, he whispered. The moment you opened that door, the moment you saw us, You became part of it. You can't just walk away. I shook my head and my throat too dry to speak. He sighed as if I had disappointed him. Then he pulled something from his pocket. His necklace. The same one he had left outside my motel room. He dangled it in front of me, letting the pendant sway. "This is yours now," he said. "No." My voice was barely a whisper. His expression darkened. "Yes." He placed the necklace around my neck. The moment it touched my skin, a strange warmth spread through my body. My pulse slowed, my mind clouded. I felt calm. Diddy smiled. "Welcome home." I don't know how long I sat there. My wrists bound, my mind clouded by whatever strange force had taken hold of me. The warmth from the necklace pulsed against my skin like a heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, hypnotic. Diddy stood over me, watching, waiting. He wasn't forcing me to do anything. He wasn't threatening me. He didn't have to. I could feel it. The slow unraveling of my own will, the way my thoughts were shifting, bending. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was something else, something much worse. Acceptance. I shook my head, trying to fight it. "This isn't real," I whispered. Diddy crouched beside me, tilting his head like he was studying an animal caught in a trap. "But it is," he said softly. "It's more real than anything you've ever known." I clenched my jaw, trying to steady my breathing. "No, you drugged me. He laughed. "No drugs," he said. "No tricks. Just the truth." He reached out, brushing his fingers over the pendant that now hung around my neck. The moment he touched it, I felt something inside me shift, like a key turning in a lock. Memories. Not mine. Theirs. Flashes of ceremonies. Candles burning low in hidden rooms. Voices chanting in a language older than time itself. People kneeling before the altar, their faces filled with something that looked like peace. I saw myself among them. I gasped, yanking against the ropes. No, I'm not." Diddy pressed the finger to his lips. "Shh," he murmured. "You'll understand soon." I shook my head violently, trying to break free from whatever was pulling me under. I wasn't like them. I wasn't. Well, but even as I thought it, a whisper slithered through my mind. A voice that wasn't mine. "You are now. Escape. Or something worse." I had to fight. I forced my breathing to slow, focused on the feeling of the rough rope biting into my skin. I needed to stay grounded. Needed to remember who I was before all of this. I wasn't one of them. I wasn't. With every ounce of strength I had left, I twisted my hands against the bindings, ignoring the burning pain as the rope cut into my wrists. I could feel the fibers weakening, fraying. Diddy was still speaking, but I wasn't listening. I was waiting. The moment my hands came free, I didn't hesitate. I lunged. I grabbed the nearest candle and swung it wildly, sending hot wax splattering across Diddy's arm. He flinched, just for a second. But that was all I needed. I ran. I shoved past the hooded figures, knocking over tables and candles as I went. Shadows flickered wildly against the walls as the room erupted into chaos. I didn't look back. I bolted up the stairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. The walls felt like they were closing in, the air growing heavier with each step. Almost there. Almost a hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. I screamed, twisting, kicking, clawing. It was one of them, one of the robed figures. Their grip was ironclad and their face hidden beneath the hood. I thrashed, panic surging through me. And then a whisper. Low, almost gentle. "You are part of it." I don't know where the strength came from, but I wrenched free and stumbled forward, crashing through the final door. The office. Fluorescent lights, desks, computers. The ordinary world. I ran through the halls, past empty cubicles, past the receptionist's desk. Except she wasn't there. No one was. The entire building was empty. I didn't stop running until I hit the street, the cold night air slamming into me like a wall. But I didn't feel relief, because I knew. I knew this wasn't over. I left the city that night, driving until the sun rose, until my body ached from exhaustion. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a destination. I just needed to be anywhere but there. But even as I put miles between myself and that place, the feeling never left me. I could still feel the necklace against my skin. I tried to take it off. It wouldn't budge. I pulled, yanked, clawed at it until my hands bled. But it was as if it had fused to me, like a brand, a mark that would never fade. A reminder. I was part of it now. I checked into a motel on the outskirts of a nowhere town, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed, shaking. I needed to tell someone. The police, the FBI, anyone who would listen. But I already knew what would happen. They wouldn't believe me. Or worse, they would. And then they'd make sure I never spoke again. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. Was I safe now? Had I really escaped? Or was this just another part of their game? That was years ago. I've moved countless times since then. Changed my name, changed my appearance. But it doesn't matter. They still find me. I see them in the corners of my vision, in crowded streets, in empty parking lots. Sometimes I wake up to find a single note slipped under my door. Come home. I don't know what they want from me. I don't know if they ever really planned to let me go. But I do know one thing. If you ever see a man named Diddy, if you ever notice the strange glint of his necklace, walk away.
I hope you watched the video from beginning to the end. It's important. Please remember to subscribe, share, and like. Thank you.